Dear friends, during this conference, we have reflected deeply on how we can honor and serve the truth by leading a theosophical life. This closing day of the ITC is dedicated to compassion, the law of laws. The book, The Voice of the Silence, shows how essential compassion is. The entire book originated from the motive of compassion for humanity. It shows in a very inspiring way the compassionate path of the Bodhisattva. The third fragment, which forms the basis for this lecture, also fully breathes the spirit of selfless compassion for all life. In this lecture, we will explore what the Bodhisattva's path can look like in daily life. We will do so by examining 4 topics. First, we focus on the question, what is compassion? We will give attention to the Bodhisattva's motive. We will look at the mental attitude required to go the path, and then how we can put the Bodhisattva path into practice in daily life. First, we will focus on the question what compassion is. For compassion is the very essence of the Bodhisattva. To do so, we turn to the most fundamental principle of Teosofía, boundlessness. This principle shows us that all life is boundless and inextricably interconnected and interwoven. Rooted in the boundlessness, all beings are, in essence, equal and fundamentally one. All life exists with and because of another. We can only exist because everything else exists. This is where the realization of compassion arises, from the realization of the unity, knowing oneself to be one with all that lives, and from that understanding, living in service of the oneness of all life. In the fragment 3 of The Voice of the Silence, H.P. Blavatsky explains compassion with the following words. Compassion is no attribute. It is the law of laws, eternal harmony, Alaya's self, a shoreless universal essence, the light of everlasting right and fitness of all things, the law of love eternal. Compassion in this passage is not a quality. It is not something we may or may not possess. It is always there, Alaya's self, which is spoken about in this quote, is the universal soul, the root of all beings, and thus also the root of humanity and of all other beings. It is the highest state of being, and as such, it is not something you need to acquire, but something that is always within you, permanent and unchanging. It is a state of consciousness, the deepest essence of what we are. It is an important recognition that in principle it can be expressed by everyone. Compassion is universal. It excludes nothing and no one, and it is entirely unconditional. This idea has far-reaching implications. If we put this into practice, it means, for example, that we are always there for family and friends. but also for people we know less well, or not at all. For if we did not do so, we would be excluding people, or even entire groups of people. This means that we help regardless of race, color, origin, gender, or appearance. We also extend our help to our so-called enemies, because compassion is always completely inclusive. Although compassion is the deepest essence of all life and is universal, it is not practiced in the same way to the same extent to everyone. And there are even many situations in the world where it is hardly possible to speak of compassion. How can that be? It is because every human being is compassionate to the extent that they have expressed it within themselves, to the extent that they are aware of the oneness of life and wish to support it. There are enormous differences between people, as we see, from still less developed to further and still further developed. When we now consider the Bodhisattva, we see that he has devoted himself entirely to compassion. For him, compassion has become the law of laws. Overall, it can be said that the absence of compassion is the cause of all the stress, suffering, and separateness in the world. And ignorance is one of the root causes of this. For it is ignorance and delusion that weighed heavily upon humanity, causing immense pain and suffering. Let us now look to the Bodhisattva's motive. For it is this pressing question of how humanity's suffering can be resolved that awakened in the Bodhisattva's mind a deep compassion for all beings. In the Mahayana scripture, Ashvaghosha puts it as follows: that which has inspired the disciple to devote himself wholeheartedly and to take earnest vows to give all that he has and all that he is in order to help humanity unceasingly. Bodhisattva means he whose essence, sattva, is wisdom and love, bodhi, because he is aware that people lack true knowledge. He ceaselessly strives to dispel illusion and ignorance, and to bring wisdom and restore harmony. The very essence of the Bodhisattva, his entire purpose and work, therefore, as referred to by Eastern symbolism, is to benefit all beings and guide them safely to the other shore. This means that he strives to help people to transcend their self-centeredness and move towards a more all-encompassing perspective, to shift their focus from illusion and external forms to an inner and more real and truthful life. To achieve this, the Bodhisattva never works alone. He works in cooperation with the more advanced beings in the cosmic hierarchy of compassion. This hierarchy of compassion is composed of the many Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and Mahatmas who serve to protect humanity and to bring the stream of wisdom from the heart of the cosmos to humanity without interruption. In the voice of the silence, compassion itself speaks when the ethical question is presented. Can there be bliss when all that lives must suffer? Shall thou be saved and hear the whole world cry? Generally speaking, a bodhisattva is described as a being just one step away from Buddhahood, almost ready to enter nirvana. However, a more esoteric teaching is that a bodhisattva purposely refuses the last step and consciously continues to work in the human sphere through self-forgetfulness. From the bodhisattva's mental attitude, he considers at every stage of his path how he can express compassion in that situation to such an extent that it is only natural for him not to take that final step and to renounce nirvana. No liberation, but self-renunciation in order to continuously and unceasingly help the still suffering and seeking beings who are on the path behind him. A bodhisattva dedicates himself to elevate the thinking of humanity. He knows that every human being is, at their core, compassionate, but that their limited conceptions prevent them from recognizing this within themselves. They do not recognize who they are in their hearts. This is what the bodhisattva fully understands and lives for. As an important link in the hierarchy of compassion towards humanity, the bodhisattva brings divine wisdom to earth in such a way that it can be received in the minds and the hearts of humanity. He does this by actively inspiring humans with wisdom, among other things, by giving knowledge on the boundless unity of all life, the workings of the cosmos, the place of humanity within the whole, and the ethics that can be derived from this. Let us now take a closer look to the following subjects: the mental attitude required to the path, which can be called the mentality of the other shore. It's worth considering that the literal meaning of Pâramitâs is other shore, and that the 7 Pâramitâs that have been given in the voice of the silence are keys to transform all aspects of our character in order to become compassionate. And that going the path means doing so entirely in connection with the here and now, within the environment in which we live and reside, in connection with the people with whom we share our lives. We do not strive for perfection, because then it becomes something that we place outside ourselves. We just constantly focus all our thoughts and actions on elevating the whole as our guiding principle. It is simply this: in everything we think and do, assume the highest vision of boundless unity, compassion, and wisdom, and be a living expression of it. The Bodhisattva path is a path of becoming and being. It is not a technical study. The emphasis lies on expressing it, on being it. The mentality of the other shore is, in fact, nothing else than living according to our highest vision of unity. From this, you wish to commit yourself to the totality, to do everything that is in your power to support all life. And that is something we do always and everywhere, regardless of our development, our position, whatever we do or whoever we are with. In all our thoughts, actions, and the choices we make, we can be motivated by compassion and continually apply the wisdom we have accumulated for the benefit of others. The life of H.P. Blavatsky shows us that this is possible. For her attitude towards all people she met throughout her life, whether friend or foe, was always that of compassion. The many examples from her life can therefore be a great source of inspiration to us. A well-known example is the moment when H.P. Blavatsky sold her own first-class ticket to give a poor woman and her children a place on a long and heavy sea voyage. Another significant example comes later in her life, when she was seriously ill, and the masters gave her the choice of either leaving this outer world and to lay down her task, or undertake a whole new phase in her life to write the secret doctrine. She agreed with the latter, with full knowledge that this would be a very challenging process. And this is precisely one of the most important books of all, in which Teosophists and other seekers for truth all over the world find so much wisdom. We may now ask ourselves when the Bodhisattva path begins. When our hearts are touched by suffering, our hearts start to open for compassion, and we begin to give greater attention to the well-being of others in our thoughts and actions, then the path begins. It begins when we realize that all beings suffer, and we wish to help them and overcome problems in life. By taking that step towards compassion, we set foot on the Bodhisattva path. And then comes the question, to which extent you express that compassion? Everyone does this to their own ability. And this will continue to refine itself over time. But the path begins here and now, by taking that first step, however small it may seem to us. It changes the whole perspective on life. Because who amongst us does not have even the tiniest spark of compassion within them to help another? We need never think, therefore, that we are too small, too inexperienced, or still too ignorant. Wherever you are, if your motive is right, it will always have an uplifting effect. You are never perfect within the boundlessness, but from the perspective of a compassionate motive, that does not matter. After all, even the tiniest bit of theosophical knowledge will always have an uplifting effect. Just think of how a single grain of salt can transform an entire meal. How do we put this into practice? How can we help others? By applying the mentality of the other shore. It starts with recognizing people in need of help and offering that help. For example, you might visit someone in your neighborhood who is ill or in need of help. You can be kind, be there, attentively, have a conversation, and try to understand what is going on in the other person's life. You might look for ways to help someone with a problem. Think along with them about how to deal with something difficult. Offer advice or give a gentle hint. You will take care of an atmosphere wherein the other feels welcome. And from there, you might also be able to discuss the deeper aspects of life, such as why that particular situation may have arisen, where you can ask questions that helps the other to understand his situation. And from there, the possibility may arise to talk, for example, about wisdom, about cause and effect, about the processes of life and death, or the unity of life. We will recognize the aspects of the Pâramitâs dana in this example, charity and love immortal, as the foundation for all your actions. You see the immortal in the other person and act out of love, knowing that we are part of the same boundless source. If we look more deeply at helping others, we see that all the Pâramitâs play a part in this. This includes, for example, Shila, harmony in word and deed, which remind us to always think and act in harmony with the unity, where harmony is written with a capital H, which means the harmony of the universal soul we have to attune to become ourselves in harmony with all that lives, thereby helping others to find harmony in themselves as well. And the more we grow in this, and the more our vision of compassion and unity expands, the more we are able to express it. Then we will also come to realize that the next key, Shanti, is necessary. For before we know it, we begin to strive, to develop, hasty, further and further. The point is to always be an expression of compassion. In our effort to help, we remain patient. We know that everything is already present within a person and that they can go through their own processes of growth. Our help will be selfless, not based on what you think the other person needs, but on what the other person actually needs to overcome their own weaknesses. You help the other person become stronger by helping them to let go of limiting thoughts and delusions. This requires an open attitude and trust without judgment. Also, when this growth does not take place immediately, we know that we have planted a seed that can also sprout later, perhaps not in this life, but in a future one. In this, we also see the importance of virag, indifference towards pleasure and pain. We'll leave it at this for now, but if you reflect for yourself on how the other Pâramitâs logically flow from this, you gain ever greater insight into the mentality of the other shore. The Pâramitâs can therefore be seen as 7 facets of a diamond. By assuming the vision of the oneness of all life and our motive to be of benefit to humanity, it is essential to bring the Pâramitâs to life within ourselves, in such a way that our lives become increasingly more guided, enlightened, ennobled, and strengthened by them to become even better helpers. The Bodhisattva path is an inner path through which we continually shift the center of our consciousness, becoming a purer channel for wisdom divine, and as a result, our spiritual stimulating influence on our fellow human beings is growing ever stronger. We do this by continually applying the wisdom we have gained exactly where we are in our lives. For that is the place where we are karmically connected to the people around us. In our family, or daily work, therefore, every opportunity presents itself to inspire those with whom we are connected. The following thoughts from the Voice of the Silence can help us with this. Thou hast to live and breathe in all, as all that thou perceivest breatheth in thee. To feel thyself abiding in all things in self. This is a thought to let sink in deeply. At the same time, it is simply the same people we keep on encountering. But because we have changed our mindset, opened our heart, and are moved by compassion, we now also see and recognize whether that friend or colleague is in need of help. Because you yourself experience that wisdom is present within you, you also know this wisdom is within the other person. And you try to inspire in such a way that the other person can activate or awaken the Buddhic nature within themselves. This means focusing not on the results, but on compassion itself. Realizing that you are a part of the whole and playing your part within it by supporting the whole. In other words, it means fulfilling your duty within the community 24/7. And for you, that is completely logical. Constantly asking yourself, each time you make decisions in life, what serves the greater whole? In this way, compassion increasingly becomes a conscious, active principle in your life. And when that happens, you become an inspiring example to your fellow men. In doing so, you may find yourself engaging in activities that, had you not done so, would never have come in your way. In this way, your sphere of influence will expand in this life or the next, enabling you gradually to reach more and more people with compassion and wisdom. That is why, in the voice of the silence, you come across the statement that self-knowledge is the child of loving deeds. Here, self is capitalized, as it refers to the universal self, the universal essence of all life, which you gain a deeper understanding of when you act out of compassion. The voice of the silence gives us an important question to ask ourselves in this regard. Now Dharma, the law, speaks. Hast thou attuned thy heart and mind to the great mind and heart of all mankind? As soon as we begin to help and pass on what we know, we will endeavor to gain the wisdom to understand how we best can help others. For it is not our personal vision we have to give, but there is something higher with which we must connect. The great heart and mind of all humanity refers to the spiritual source of all humanity. It is to this that we have to attune ourselves. This means that everything finds a resonance in our own Buddhic heart. We exclude nothing, help everything, and are kind to all things and people. In this way, we can do justice to the truth and take our responsibility on the path by becoming a channel of wisdom and follow in the footsteps of the Tathagata, the one who has gone before us, to work together to pass the stream of wisdom on to our fellow men. And this passing on of wisdom is needed because, as H.P. Blavatsky writes, esoteric wisdom is not easy to find, not in our world with all its problems. Its entrance is overgrown with the thicket of neglect, the caricatures of truth from time long past barred away. So we see how important it is to study and to bring wisdom to life within ourselves and work together in order to achieve this. As is the case, for example, during the ITC, where cross-pollination helps us to broaden our insight and learn from each other. In this way, we will be able to distinguish more clearly illusion from reality, false from true, and the perishable from the imperishable. Always united in our focus on the purpose. What does the whole need? What does the other person need in order to develop? When we start working for the benefit of the whole, it brings our lives in acceleration and requires us to overcome the personal and the limited in order to become something greater. We will have to leave old habits and tendencies behind so that there is more room and more strength within us to help others. When we reflect on this, we will see that a compassionate life is the most natural way to live. It is the development of an inner strength that is released when we forget ourselves in the service of the well-being for the whole. An inner strength that overcomes all personal challenges and limitations. And as Blavatsky says, whose reward there is past all telling, namely the power to save humanity. We have now come to the end of this lecture. Let us summarize the main thoughts of the Bodhisattva path in daily life. It means that compassion is before us, living according to our highest vision of unity, which is the other sure mentality we attune to. In order to do everything that is in our power to support all life. We include everything, recognizing people in need of help and offering that help. And that can be done always and everywhere. When our heart is touched by compassion, and out of that take the first step to help, the Bodhisattva path begins. It is a path that opens up and that never ends. It continues logically by renouncing nirvana. In this way, like the Bodhisattva, we too can become a valuable link in the hierarchy of compassion. For through our motive of compassion, we will naturally remain in the world to work ceaselessly for humanity. We wish to conclude this lecture with the word of His Holiness the Tashi Lama, who was enthroned in 1888 during the lifetime of H.P. Blavatsky. He gave the following handwritten dedication as confirmation of the accuracy of the voice of the silence. All beings desire liberation from misery. Seek, therefore, for the causes of misery and expunge them. By entering on the path, liberation from misery is attained. Exhort then all beings to enter the path.